The tomatoes went first every morning. Always the tomatoes, because Nkechi Adeyemi had learned 17 years ago on a Tuesday in the wet season that tomatoes bruised by noon if the sun came from the wrong direction. And on Osu Oxford Street in Accra, the sun always came from the wrong direction by 10 a.m. She arranged them anyway, 43 of them that morning. Each one turned so its best face looked outward, because her mother had told her that a stall that looks like it doesn't care sells like it doesn't care. And Nkechi had never in her life been willing to look like she didn't care. She was 44 years old, and she had been at this same spot on Osu Oxford Street since she was 27. The same blue tarpaulin overhead, the same wooden table with the uneven legs she had shimmed with a folded piece of cardboard replaced every 3 weeks. And her hands smelled of garden eggs and palm oil and the faint metallic trace of the coin she handled from before 6 in the morning until the last customer left. She did not know, on that particular Wednesday in March, that the old man who came to her stall every morning for 4 months was not what he appeared to be. No one on Osu Oxford Street did. But someone was coming who had been looking for her for a very long time. Her full name was Nkechi Abena Adeyemi, named for her Ghanaian grandmother on her mother's side and her Nigerian grandfather on her father's. A combination her mother had always said meant she was built from 2 kinds of stubbornness. She had grown up 2 streets from where she now sold vegetables, in a house that had 3 rooms and 7 people, and a kitchen that doubled as a sewing room because her aunt ran alterations out of the back window for the women from the church. Nkechi had started at the market at 10, running errands for the older women, learning the names of things before she learned their prices, because her mother said the name was more important. Know what something is before you decide what it's worth. By 19, she was buying and selling on her own account. By 27, she had the spot on Osu Oxford Street, the blue tarpaulin, and a reputation for garden eggs so fresh they still had dew on them if you came before 8. She had raised 2 children, her daughter Zuri, now 22 and studying accounting at the University of Ghana in Legon, and her son Tobena, 19, in his first year. She had done this alone, or nearly alone, after her husband Kofi left in 2014, on a morning that began like an ordinary morning and ended with his side of the wardrobe empty. She had not spoken his name to anyone in 18 months. She had redirected what that name used to take from her into the stall, into the tomatoes and the garden eggs and the yams stacked at the corner, into her children's school fees, into the small savings she kept in a blue plastic container behind the yams that she had been adding to every month for 4 years, and which now held 6,400 Ghana cedis. Enough, almost, for the freezer unit that would let her sell fish, too. Which would let her earn in the cool season what she currently could only earn in the warm one. She did not speak about the savings to anyone. She did not speak about Kofi. She spoke about tomatoes, about prices, about the rain, about whose yams were coming in soft this week, and whose plantain was genuinely ripe versus merely yellow. She was not a woman people described as warm, exactly, but she was a woman people came back to, which she had always found more reliable than warmth. The old man had appeared on a Monday in November. He came around 7:30, before the market fully opened, when the stalls were setting up and the foot traffic was mostly other sellers and the delivery boys on bicycles. He was perhaps 75, perhaps older, dressed in a cloth wrapper that had been washed so many times the pattern had become a suggestion rather than a design. He carried nothing. He smelled of wood smoke and something older, harder to place, not unwashed but untended. The smell of a person who had been outdoors for longer than was voluntary. He stopped at Nkechi's stall and looked at the garden eggs. "How much?" he asked. She told him. He looked at the price for a moment in a way that told her everything she needed to know. He nodded and moved on without buying anything. He came back the following morning at the same time, and the morning after that. By the fourth day, Nkechi had understood the shape of the situation completely, which was that this man was going to come to her stall every morning and look at the garden eggs and not buy them, and that this was going to continue until something changed. On the fifth morning, she put 3 garden eggs and 2 tomatoes in a black plastic bag and set it on the corner of the table when she saw him coming. "Take it," she said. He stopped. "I didn't ask. I know you didn't." He looked at the bag. He looked at her. He picked it up without thanking her and walked in the direction of the old post office building where, she had been told by the woman at the next stall, he sometimes slept in the covered walkway. She watched him go and then turned back to her tomatoes and did not think about it further. She did not think of it as a decision she had made. It was simply the next obvious thing. She did it again the following morning. And the morning after that, garden eggs, tomatoes, sometimes a handful of garden pepper, sometimes a piece of plantain she had cut from one that was too ripe to sell at full price. She did not make an event of it. She did not call his name as he approached. She had learned it was Yaw from the woman at the next stall, and that no one knew his surname or where he had come from, only that he had been somewhere in the neighborhood for about 2 years. She did not speak to him about his situation or ask questions about his history. She put the bag on the corner of the table. He took it. Occasionally he said something brief. "The garden eggs are good today," or "rain coming this afternoon," and she would respond equally briefly. And that was the full transaction. This continued for 4 months and 3 weeks, every morning except Sundays, which was the one morning she did not come to the stall. On a Wednesday in March at 7:47 a.m., a white Rolls-Royce Phantom moved slowly along Osu Oxford Street and stopped in front of Nkechi's stall. The street was not a street where Rolls-Royces stopped. The car sat there with the particular stillness of something that knows it does not need to announce itself. Several people nearby stopped moving. Nkechi did not stop moving. She was stacking yams at the corner, and she looked at the car the way she looked at all unexpected things, directly, without rushing her expression. The back door opened. Yaw got out. He was wearing a different cloth. This one had a pattern that was complete and precise, deep blue and gold, and it was not wrapped, but draped with the deliberate ease of someone who had been dressing in formal cloth their entire adult life. He stood on the pavement of Osu Oxford Street, and for a moment he looked exactly the same as he always had. The same face, the same age, the same eyes that looked at garden eggs with the attention of someone who had once known exactly what a good garden egg should cost. Except now, the car was behind him, and a young man in a dark suit was standing at the door, and 2 more were on the pavement, and the old man Nkechi had been giving food to for 4 months and 3 weeks was standing in the middle of it as though it were. Completely ordinary. He walked to her stall. "Good morning, Nkechi," he said. She looked at him for a moment. She set down the yam she was holding. "Good morning, Yaw. My name is not Yaw. It is Emmanuel Kwadwo Owusu Mensah." He said it without particular drama, the way one corrects a small error in an account. "I apologize for the name. I needed one that wouldn't be recognized." Nkechi looked at the car, looked back at him. "Why would your name be recognized?" "Because I have given it to several things. A hospital in Kumasi, a school in Tamale, a foundation in Accra that my daughter has been running for 8 years. He paused. "I also own the building you are standing in front of." Nkechi did not speak for a moment. The woman at the next stall had gone completely still. Several other sellers had oriented themselves toward Nkechi's stall with the body language of people who are pretending not to listen while listening completely. "You have been at this stall for 17 years, Emmanuel said. "Your lease on this space has been renewed through a management company. You have never been late on a payment. In 17 years, you have been late once, in 2016, by 11 days. And you called the office before the due date to explain and to give a new date, which you met." He said this as though reading it, but he was not reading anything. He had simply remembered it. "I began walking this street in November because my doctor told me I needed to walk every morning, and I did not want to walk in cantonments where someone would see me and try to have a conversation about business. I chose Osu Oxford Street because it is alive early in the morning, and I have always liked a market at dawn." "And the food," Nkechi said. "I was not hungry. I wanted to see what you would do." She looked at him steadily. "You tested me. I observed you. There is a difference." He looked at the stall, the tomatoes in their careful arrangement, the yams stacked at the corner, the blue tarpaulin, the table with the uneven leg. A woman who gives food to someone who cannot return the favor every morning for 4 months, without making a ceremony of it, without requiring gratitude, that is not a person you test. That is a person you look at carefully for a long time until you understand what you are looking at. If this story is already sitting with you in the way I think it is, stay, because what Emmanuel says next is the thing that changes the full shape of what these 4 months were. He had a daughter. Her name was Constance, and she was 46, and she had been running the Owusu Mensa Foundation for 8 years. A foundation that funded small enterprise development across the Greater Accra region, specifically for women in informal markets. She had been trying, for 3 of those 8 years, to expand the foundation's work into a direct supply chain initiative, sourcing vegetables, grains, and perishables from small market sellers at fair prices, and supplying them to a network of restaurants and hotels in Accra that had agreed to prioritize local sourcing. The logistics existed. The agreements existed. The capital existed. What did not exist was the right person to anchor the supplier side, someone the market trusted. Someone who knew produce with the precision of someone who had been touching it every morning for 17 years. Someone who could assess quality and volume and timing with the accuracy the initiative required. Emmanuel had been walking Osu Oxford Street every morning for 4 months because he had heard the name Adeyemi from a woman named Pauline at the Makola market, who had said without being asked that if you wanted to know who in this part of Accra actually understood vegetables the way a surgeon understands the body, you went to Nkechi at the Blue Tarpaulin on Osu Oxford Street, and you did not argue with what she told you. He had come to observe her. He had observed her. He now reached into the jacket of his cloth, a pocket Nkechi had not noticed, sewn flat against the interior lining, and produced a card, which he placed on the corner of her table in the same spot where she placed his bag every morning. "My daughter will call you today," he said. "Her name is Constance. When she calls, please answer." He paused. "If you have questions before she calls, the number is on the card. What is she calling about?" "A position, a formal one, with a contract." He looked at the stall one more time. "You have been running a supply business from this table for 17 years. The question is whether you would like a larger table." He returned to the car. The young man in the dark suit opened the door. Emmanuel Kwadwo Owusu Mensa sat down. The door closed. The Rolls-Royce moved slowly along Osu Oxford Street in the direction of cantonments, and it passed 4 other stalls and 3 delivery boys on bicycles, and one woman who had entirely stopped pretending to arrange her wares, and was simply watching the car leave with her hands folded over her chest. The woman at the next stall turned to Nkechi and said, "That man ate your tomatoes for 4 months." "Garden eggs," Nkechi said. "Nkechi, I know." She picked up the card. It was cream-colored and heavy, the kind of cardstock that costs something. On the front, Emmanuel Kwadwo Owusu Mensah. Below it, 4 lines of text. Below that, a phone number. She put it in the pocket of her cloth. Constance called at 11:14 a.m. while Nkechi was midway through a transaction involving 6 plantains and a negotiation that had been ongoing for approximately 4 minutes. Nkechi held up one finger to the customer, stepped to the side, and answered. Constance Owusu Mensah had her father's directness and a different register of energy. Where he was still, she was precise, organized, the sense of someone who had built many things and knew which questions to ask before the next one. She did not waste time on pleasantries beyond the minimum. She explained the initiative in 11 minutes. She asked 3 questions. She listened to the answers completely before responding. At the end of the conversation, she said, "I would like to meet with you this week, at a time that works for your schedule. I'll come to you. I'm at the stall until 3 most days," Nkechi said. "Thursday at 2? Thursday at 2. Constance came on Thursday at 2, without a car that announced itself, in a plain white SUV with the Foundation logo in small letters on the door. She was 46, as Emmanuel had said, wearing a simple kente-patterned blouse and dark trousers, and she carried a leather portfolio that she set on the table beside Nkechi's scale. She spoke clearly and showed Nkechi the documents as she spoke, the supply agreements with the restaurants and hotels, 12 of them, all signed, representing a combined weekly vegetable volume that made Nkechi do a specific calculation in her head, and then do it again because the first result seemed large. She asked Nkechi questions about sourcing, about the farmers she worked with, about how she assessed ripeness at volume, about how she handled a week when the tomatoes came in wrong. Nkechi answered each question with the directness she had been using at this stall for 17 years, because she had no other mode and no reason to perform one. By 3:15, the conversation had become a negotiation. By 4 low, it had become an agreement in principle. And by 4:30, Constance had produced a formal letter of engagement that she placed on the table and said, "Read this properly tonight. Bring any questions to my office on Monday. If it looks right to you, we sign Monday." Nkechi looked at the letter, at the figure in the contract line that specified her monthly coordination fee. She looked at it for long enough that Constance said, "Is something wrong with the amount?" "Nothing is wrong with it," Nkechi said. She folded the letter carefully. "I just want to be sure I'm reading it correctly." "You are," Constance said. She signed on Monday. The first supply run happened the following Thursday. Her, 2 of the farmers she had worked with for 11 and 6 years respectively, a hired van, and a route she had designed herself using the knowledge of which markets had what at which hour of the week, built from 17 years of being present before the city was fully awake. The first restaurant called the Foundation at noon to say the produce was exceptional. 3 more called by Friday. She did not stop her stall on Osu Oxford Street. She restructured it, less of the daily sell, more of the sourcing and assessment. A young woman named Alma, who she trained to run the front while she managed the supply relationships. The blue tarpaulin stayed. The wooden table with the shimmed legs stayed. She replaced the cardboard shim with a proper piece of rubber cut to size, which had always been the correct solution and which she had been postponing, because there had always been something more urgent. There was now slightly less that was urgent. She found herself, on a Tuesday in May, cutting the piece of rubber and fitting it under the leg with the satisfaction of someone completing a very old task. She bought the freezer unit in June. It was a commercial chest freezer, white, 400 liters, and it cost 9,200 cedis, which was 2,800 more than the 6,400 she had saved in the blue plastic container behind the yams. She paid the difference from the first 2 months of her coordination fee with the foundation. She called Zuri that evening to tell her about the freezer, and Zuri said, "Mama, I want to hear everything." And they talked for an hour and 12 minutes, and Nkechi sat at her kitchen table and described the freezer in specific detail. The hinge mechanism, the temperature range, the basket insert for smaller items, and Zuri listened the way children listen when they are hearing their parent be fully themselves, which is not very different from the way Nkechi had always listened to the market. Emmanuel came to the stall one more time. It was a Thursday in July, early, before 8:00, and he was in his walking clothes, the wrapper faded but present, the same shoes. He had come without the car. He stood at the corner of the table and looked at the tomatoes arranged in their careful rows. "The freezer unit is new," he said. "2 months," Nkechi said. He nodded. He looked at the garden eggs. He looked at her. "I should tell you that the first morning I took the bag, I nearly told you the truth." "Why didn't you?" "Because you didn't need me to. You had already done the thing." He bought a bag of garden eggs. He paid the full price, which was 12 cedis, and he gave her a 20 cedis note and told her to keep the change, and she told him she didn't keep change, and she gave him 8 cedis back in exact coins from the cloth pouch she kept at her waist, and he took the coins and put them in his pocket and walked back in the direction he had come from, unhurried, the way a man walks who is not rushing toward anything because he has already arrived. There is a woman at a stall on Osu Oxford Street in Accra who has been there for 17 years, and for the first 4 months of the 18th year, she gave away a bag of garden eggs and tomatoes every morning, without expecting anything back, because it was simply what was needed, and she was the person who could provide it. She was not giving in order to receive. She was not performing generosity for an audience. She did not know anyone was watching. Everyone who mattered was watching. The world has a habit of overlooking people like this. People who maintain their standards quietly, who give from the last of what they have without making a ceremony of it, who build things carefully and specifically, and without applause. The world confuses quietness with smallness and calls endurance ordinary. It does not recognize, until a car stops unexpectedly on a street where cars like that do not stop, that the person behind the tarpaulin has been carrying something extraordinary all along. Not luck, not grace. Judgment, the kind that knows what things are worth before it decides what to charge. You cannot give a person Nkechi's kind of character by arriving in a Rolls Royce. You cannot manufacture it with a contract, or a freezer unit, or a foundation's letterhead. It was there at 6 a.m., when the market was still setting up and she was arranging tomatoes by their best face. It was there the 5th morning when she put a bag on the corner of the table without being asked. It was there at 11:14 a.m. when she held up one finger to a customer mid-negotiation and answered a call from a stranger because she had been asked to, and she did not break her word. The car confirmed nothing. It simply gave back, in formal terms, what had already been true in informal ones. What you carry into the morning determines what the morning carries back to you. Not always. Not quickly, not in the form you expected. But the character you maintain when no one appears to be watching is the same character that gets recognized when someone finally looks. If you pass the same person at the same corner every morning for 4 months, someone who had nothing visible, someone the street had seemed to forget. What would you do on the fifth morning? Not what you think you should do. What would you actually do? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.